So the modern names for the pyramid are the Great Pyramid of Giza, Pyramid of Khafre, and the Pyramid of Menkaure. I've always believed that these pyramids were not built by the Egyptians, that they are actually pre-flood buildings. So a lot of people have seen the information from the geologist Dr. Robert Schoch and his study on the Sphinx and how the Sphinx and around the Sphinx there's water damage. Here in this picture image here, the Great Sphinx of Egypt in its enclosure with a diagram indicating the deep fissures and undulating surfaces created by water, rainfall, weathering, and erosion. So there's a lot of rain erosion around the Sphinx. The southern wall of the Sphinx enclosure showing water via rainfall erosion. If you want to look into this story, it's from the documentary The Mystery of the Sphinx. So, according to Egyptologists, the Sphinx is dated to the Old Kingdom times, showing only wind erosion. But Robert Schoch, looking at it in terms of geology, says that it's most definitely water erosion. So we have images of the Sphinx buried in sand. So they've dug the Sphinx out of the earth here. And you know, it's possible that at some point in time the pyramids were even buried and may have been dug out by the Egyptians rather than built by them. In Genesis 4:17 it says, "And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methuselah, and Methuselah begat Lamech. And Lamech took unto him 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. And Ada bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father of such as handle the harp and organ. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives Ada and Zillah, Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken to my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70 and 7-fold. And so Cain was the first builder. He built a city named after his son Enoch. So not the Enoch who didn't die, it's a different Enoch. Although there's some kind of similarities here with Methuselah and Enoch being in the line of Seth. But what if perhaps this city was actually this city here, the pyramids? And there's actually many pyramids across the whole earth that are hidden, and they seem to be buildings from antiquity that are covered in earth and look like mountains simply because they've been covered up with so much dirt. And we have the Bosnian pyramid, there's pyramids in China, and there's even the pyramids that people say are in Antarctica. There is a mountain there that does look a lot like a pyramid on 3 sides. The other side is a little bit suspect, but you know, who knows? If we can't get down there and get proper photos of it, perhaps it's just a side that collapsed or something happened to it. There seems to have been a civilization that were builders of cities that were designed around the pyramid shape. This one here is in Java, Indonesia. It's covered in earth, and they've even done terracing on the sides of it, and it looks very much like the Mexican pyramids that were covered in earth before they were excavated. So, you know, is this where the Egyptians got their Holy Trinity story from? The pyramids, Father, Mother, and Child, the original Holy Trinity. So we have Osiris, which is said to be Nimrod, Horus, Tammuz, and Set, Shem. The story of the Trinity God is said to be Nimrod and his wife Semiramis and their son Tammuz. And, you know, they say that the Egyptians got this religion from Nimrod, and it's probably likely. But, you know, we also have these pyramids which represent the three gods, or father, mother, child. Then we have Cain building the first city after his son and naming it after his son Enoch. So we have the father and his wife, and we have the son Enoch. We also have Adam and Eve and their son Cain. After he murdered Abel, there was just the three left. And we have Jesus calling the Pharisees the sons of Cain, the serpent seed, the sons of their father, the devil. So it wasn't until after Adam and Eve ate the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil that they conceived Cain. It said, Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. So after this point, Adam and Eve had been changed genetically somehow, and Cain was their first child that was conceived after this happened. So we can see here that Cain was the seed of the serpent. Some say Cain was actually the seed of Satan or the serpent. And as I've said before, I can't prove this, so let's not go down that road. The Bible clearly does say that Adam knew Eve and he was the father of Cain. So I don't know why it would tell us otherwise. But no matter what happened, Adam and Eve were genetically changed by eating this fruit, and their children now knew both good and evil. And it appears that Cain's genetics expressed the serpent or evil side of him, whereas Abel's genetics expressed a knowledge of God. Our flesh is our adversary. And, you know, I'm still doing this Satan series, and I want to go into the man at the tombs that Jesus sends the demons out of, and how he was there worshipping the ancestors. And I think that has a lot to do with this, that we inherit our genetics from our ancestors, and every possibility of genetics is within our DNA, but we only express that which we receive from our parents and from our ancestors. I think that it shows in the breeding of animals that, you know, all dogs come from the wolf, yet all dogs don't look like a wolf. And we know that by taking one specific set of genetics, and if we keep breeding those set of genetics, we end up with a breed of dog that keeps expressing those genetic traits. And I think that perhaps maybe this might have something to do with the seed of the serpent, that, and why Israel was to keep themselves separate, because, you know, it said that Noah was pure in his generations. And I think that being a descendant of Seth, that Noah's children, although they were not perfect and they were subject to committing sin as well, that within their genetics they did not express some of the evil serpent-like traits that can be bred into certain genetic groups. Now, that being said, I think everybody is capable of salvation, but, you know, like as I've said, our flesh is our adversary, and we look at these Pharisees being called seed of Cain, or children of Cain, seed of the serpent. And we see a lot of these outside nations like the Edomites, and as I've stated in other videos, that the Edomites were in the temple system at that time. Edomite was the king of Judea. That Esau had bad traits in him, and not only that, he married wives from the outside nations that had bad traits in them. They were Baal worshippers, and breeding families within these systems and continually producing family that are more likely to express these traits. And I think that if you go back, I have done a talk on how genetics work and how we could all be descendants of Noah. That, we know with genetics and DNA that certain markers can be turned on and off to express personality traits, to express certain looks, hair coloring, different things like that. I think that is why God told them not to mix with the outside nations, because he did not want people to breed into their families more of those negative traits that had been put into the genetics of mankind from Adam and Eve. So what I'm trying to say here is that, if Cain was the first builder of the first city, is it possible that perhaps the Giza Plateau was that first city? And we have depicted in the 3 pyramids, we have the father, the mother, and the child. As with the Freemasonry, they're showing us that these pillars represent the sun, the father, the moon, the mother, and the eye of Lucifer, which is the pyramid, or the unification of mother and father into the child. The Bible shows us that the sun is the father, the moon is the mother, and the stars are the family. And it shows us in the dream of Joseph that when Joseph dreams, his father is the sun, his mother's the moon, and the stars bow down to him, which would be Cain, the seed of the serpent, represented here as the 3rd pillar, or the ladder to heaven, placing himself in the stars or above the stars of heaven. The eye of Lucifer in Freemasonry is depicted in a pyramid. And why the Egyptology? Why the pyramid? Why the builders? Why are they the builders? In Genesis 11, and it says, "And the whole earth was of one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and slime, and had they for mortar." So here we see, after the flood, the rebuilding of cities again. And they said, "Go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad about the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men built. The Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it said, "Even as Nimrod the mighty hunter before the Lord." And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So this is where they built the city, or the Tower of Babel. So Nimrod was the son of Cush, and Cush was the son of Ham. And the sons of Ham, Cush and Mizraim and Put and Canaan. So Canaan was a son of Ham after the flood, and Ham was cursed by God. And the sons of Noah went forth of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan, or the people of Canaan. Canaan in the Strongest Concordance means son of Ham. It's from Cana, humiliated. Canaan, a son of Ham, also the country inhabited by him, Canaan, merchant or traffic, which is really interesting. The Canaanites are merchants or traffickers. Cain, on the other hand, as in Cain and Abel, is Kayin, a city in southern Judah. A proper name of people, location, proper name masculine. The exhaustive is the same as Kayin, with a play upon affinity of Quana. Kajin, the name of the first child, also of a place in Palestine. Kayin, a spear. So the word Cain comes from the origin of Kayin, which means a spear, from Quan in the original sense of fixity, a lance as striking fast spear. So according to the ancient Near East history or mythology on Orion, in ancient Egypt, the stars of Orion were regarded as a god called Sar. Because Orion rises before Sirius, the star whose heliacal rising was the basis for the solar Egyptian calendar, Sar was closely linked with Sopdet, the goddess who personified Sirius. The god Sopdu is said to be the son of Sar and Sopdet. Sar is syncretized with Osiris, while Sopdet is syncretized with Osiris, mythological wife Isis. In the pyramid text, from the 24th and the 23rd century BC, Sar is one of many gods whose form the dead pharaoh is said to take in the afterlife. So here we have this connection with, as I was saying, the mother, father, child religion, the goddess Isis and the god Osiris, and the child Sar or Horus, or as we see here, what the Egyptians called him, Orion. So where did the Egyptians get this concept of Orion and the tri-god system and the pyramids being built in the image of Orion's belt? And did they take it from the Antediluvian people? It says here, the Babylonian star catalogues of the late Bronze Age name Orion, Sip-a-zi-ana, the heavenly shepherd or true shepherd of Anu, Anu being the chief god of the heavenly realms. The Babylonian constellation is sacred to Papshukal and Ninshubur, both minor gods fulfilling the role of messengers to the gods. Papshukal is closely associated with the figure of the walking bird on Babylonian boundary stones. And on the star map, the figure of the rooster is located below and behind the figure of the true shepherd. Both constellations represent the herald of the gods in his bird and human form respectively. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. And he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant shall be unto his brethren." So Ham's descendants were cursed. Why it says Canaan, I'm not sure, but Ham saw the nakedness of his father. Some say it's because he touched his father's wife, and perhaps Canaan was the result of that. I won't go into that here. I have done that in other videos. So, it's interesting that this pagan trinity is said to come from Babylon, from Nimrod and his wife and his child. And I'm just wondering where Nimrod got it from. And I honestly think that it's a pre-flood religion. I think that it goes all the way back to Cain, the first builder of cities. This is why when they came out of the flood, I think they started to rebuild the cities. In Luke 17, it says, "And as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So here we're talking about the Spirit of God in man, and yet he's also flesh, his adversary. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him in his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and creeping thing, and the fowl of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. So Noah was a direct descendant of Seth and Adam. He was perfect in his generations. He hadn't mixed with the outside people. Now, it doesn't say anything in Genesis about the wives of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So it's quite possible that one of their wives, possibly Ham's wife, was of the people of the earth at that time and not necessarily pure in her generation, or even Japheth's wife. There's no saying who these women were. It doesn't say that they were pure in their generation. We only hear that Noah was pure in his generation. You would just assume that Noah's wife and Noah's children were pure in their generation, but there's no indication that their wives were at all. So it could be through this line, and why we have so much mother goddess worship after the flood, that it was through the female line that the mighty men of old, their genetics and generations were brought back into the population, were rebred into especially these aristocratic lines that are obsessed with breeding only amongst themselves, and especially following their genetics from the female line and not from the male line. And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So it's the man of flesh that's destroying the earth, and this is what Jesus came to tell us, that we have to put to death the flesh and grow in the spirit, in the quickening of the spirit. We know the story. Noah makes an ark, and God saves 8 people from the Antediluvian world and resets humanity. And I think that, what's interesting is it's possible that Ham's wife may have been a descendant of these mighty men, which I think are the descendants of Cain and not the descendants of Seth, his brother, after he murdered Abel. They were building cities and towers, and when we look at it, Nimrod is a descendant of Ham, and Ham was the one who was cursed in Canaan, and these are the people that the Israelites were told, do not mix with them. So I think that they had tainted genetics, and I think that there were remnants of a descendant from these people after the flood through one of the wives of Noah's sons. And perhaps this is why they have the mother goddess religion. I mean, maybe they worship her because she brought through this genetic bloodline of the serpent seed. When we look at the worship of Inanna and her 8-pointed star, it's very ancient. It's so ancient, it goes back to pretty much the dawn of civilization. And I think she comes from out of the flood. And I think that, she is represented by the star Venus. She's riding the back of the lion here. It goes throughout all global religions, this mother, goddess, father, child story. And, you know, I can't prove that one of the wives of Noah's sons was from a descendant of the mighty men, but, you know, maybe if they knew this, maybe if Nimrod knew that his grandmother or great-grandmother was one of these people. He's the first mighty man after the flood. He's the first city builder after the flood. He shows all the traits of the Canaanites, which in the Strong's definition means merchant or trafficker. And we know that in Babylon, it was the start of the merchant system and the building of the cities, the building of the trade, the building of the Silk Road system, which could have been in the descendants of Noah anyway, because when we look at it, Cain was a son of Adam and Eve, so we all have these possibility of these traits, but, you know, they're worshipping the mother goddess here. Maybe she was the mother. And when you go into the story of Nimrod and the story of Inanna, it links up to Nimrod and the mother of Nimrod, or the grandmother of Nimrod. In this article, The Great Inception by Derek P. Gilbert, The Mystery of Inanna, Patron Goddess of Nimrod, it says, Nimrod was the second generation after the flood. His father was Cush, son of Ham, son of Noah. In Sumerian history, the second king of Uruk after the flood was named Enmerkar, son of Meshkayangasha. Enmerkar was also a compound word. The prefix en means lord and suffix kar is Sumerian for hunter. So Enmerkar was Enmer the hunter. Sound familiar? So Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Genesis 10. So we don't know exactly where Arat was, but guesses range from northern Iran to Armenia. Now, I've did a story on Armenia Minor, and the Herods in the video I did on Georgia. So, which would be interesting. Not only is Armenia located near the center of an ancient kingdom called Urartu, which may be cognate to Arata, it's where Noah landed his boat, the mountains of Ararat. So it's possible Nimrod and Merkah was trying to intimidate the people, his cousins basically, who settled near where his great-grandfather landed the ark. But we just don't know whether it was Merkah muscled his neighboring kingdom to compel them to send building materials for a couple of projects near and dear to his heart. Some background. The poem refers to Merkah's capital city of Uruk as the Great Mountain. So here we have the king of the mountain. This is intriguing since Uruk, like most Sumer, sits in an alluvial plain where there are precisely no mountains whatsoever. Uruk was home to two of the chief gods of the Sumerian pantheon, Anu, the sky god, and Inanna, his great-granddaughter, the goddess of war and sex. And by sex we mean carnal, extramarital kind. Well, Anu was pretty much retired like the later Canaanite god El. Having handed over his duties, his head of the pantheon, to Enlil, Inanna played a very active role in Sumerian society. For example, scholars have translated ritual texts for innkeepers to pray to Inanna, asking her to guarantee that their bordellos turn a profit. Apparently, part of the problem between Enmerkar and the king of Arata, whose name we learned from separate epic was Enshukeshadana, was a dispute over who was Inanna's favorite. One of the building projects Enmerkar wanted to tackle was magnificent temple to Inanna, the E'ana, house of heaven. He wanted Arata to supply the raw materials. Apparently, this wasn't only because there isn't much in the way of timber, jewels, or precious metal in the plains of Sumer, but because Enmerkar wanted the Lord of Arata to submit and acknowledge that he was Inanna's chosen one. And so Enmerkar prayed to Inanna, "My sister, let Arata fashion gold and silver skillfully on my behalf for Uruk, let them cut the flawless lapis lazuli from the blocks, let them, the translucence of the flawless lapis lazuli, build a holy mountain in Unug. Let Arata build a temple brought down from heaven, your place of worship, the shrine Anna. Let Arata skillfully fashion the interior of the holy Jippah, your abode. May the radiant youth, may I be embraced there by you. Let Arata submit beneath the yoke for Unug on my behalf." Notice that Inanna's temple was like Uruk compared to a holy mountain, and given the types of goddess Inanna was the embrace Enmerkar wanted more than just a figure of speech. Well, no, let's continue with the digression for a minute. We should stop for a brief look at Inanna's role in human history. The goddess has been known by many names through the ages: Inanna in Sumer, Ishtar in Babylon, Ashtarte in Canaan, Ataragatis in Syria, Aphrodite in Greece, and Venus across the Roman world. Let's just say the image we were taught of Aphrodite Venus in high school mythology class was way off. Since we'd like to keep this a family-friendly book, we won't dig too deeply into the history of the characteristics of Inanna. Scholars don't completely agree on the details anyway, but it's safe to say Inanna wasn't a girl you'd bring home to meet your mother. In fact, she wasn't always a girl, period. You see, while Inanna was definitely the goddess with the mostest when it came to sexual appeal, she was also androgynous. She was sometimes known with masculine features like a beard. One tablet, although from much later in the first millennium BC, almost 3,000 years after Nimrod, Inanna says, "When I sit in the alehouse, I am a woman, and I am an exuberant young man." Her cult followers include eunuchs and transvestites, and she was apparently the first in history to make a practice of sex reassignment. She changes the right side, male, into the left side, female. She changes the left side into the right side. She turns a man into a woman. She turns a woman into a man. She adorns a man as a woman. She adorns a woman as a man. And, you know, today we can see that all these Hollywood stars and all these inverted sex people are nothing more than Inanna worshippers, as in the days of Noah. It's wonderfully ironic the 21st century progressive ideal for gender fluidity was personified from more than 5,000 years ago by the Sumerian goddess Inanna. You know, so when we look at this, we've got Enmerkar, who is said to be Nimrod, and the other king Enshukeshdana, and they're fighting over Inanna like she's a real woman, and, you know, my sister, they call her. It's said that, you know, Semiramis was Nimrod's wife and they had a child, but in my hypothesis that perhaps this was the worship of the woman who brought through the mighty man genetics from the flood. If indeed she was a wife of, say, Ham, for example, Noah lived for hundreds of years after the flood. The people before the flood lived for a long time. And it's quite possible that this could be the very woman. You know, like if we think about it, it was the descendants after the flood whose lifespans were shortened. And, you know, she may have lived for hundreds of years, just like Noah and just like his sons, because they were pre-flood beings who lived a lot longer. Is Inanna a pre-flood goddess, or, you know, a woman who came out of the flood made a deity? So the eight-pointed star, one of the most reoccurring symbols in ancient civilization, is the eight-pointed star. It was known as the Star of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, the Garsulin star, the Lakshmi star, and can be seen in ancient artwork including the tablet of Shamash and Akkadian cylinder seals. It's also, the north, south, east, and west symbol. So we have north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. And I'm wondering maybe this star could be related to the changing of the poles, the pole shift. If it's Mount Meru is related to Hyperborea and the North Pole, that perhaps the flood was caused by a pole shift and a changing in the system of the Earth. Maybe this star could be referring to that. Who knows? It could be referring to, the North Star. And it's also interesting that 8 people came out of the flood and this star has 8 points. It's related to the Ahura Mazda, or the Persian winged disc. Remember that Inanna was both male and female, so, Ahura Mazda could simply just be a symbol of Inanna. It's also the winged rosette, or the flower, the rose being a symbol of Lucifer as well. And this is an ancient Hittite version of this symbol. And the ancient Hittites, I believe, were the forefathers of the Khazarians. And they all come from this region around the Caucasus, Armenia. They come out from the flood. They come out from where the ark settled in Ararat, the winged scarab. This is just another version of this symbol of Inanna. Why the scarab beetle? I'm not real sure about that. But, in Egypt, they also had the sign of the falcon, which was the winged sun disk. The scarabs pushing the sun disk. So probably the scarab, because it's related to the story of the scarab beetles rolling the dung and, the giant scarab beetle in the sky rolling the sun into its hole of a night. So it's the winged sun again, relating back to the sun. So this is kind of crazy. I found this article on ancient origins, and it's about Athena, and I'll just read it now. The hidden identity of the woman glorified as Athena, her link to the pre-flood world. Alan Lequire, who reconstructed her idol image, stands beside her, giving us an idea of the immense adoration the ancient Greeks had for this woman. But why? Here is that woman in all her splendor, reconstructed in the imitation Pantheon in Nashville, Tennessee, based on the original in her ancient temple atop Athens' Acropolis. The high place of the city, Athens is the title or epithet. Well, we'll find out her real human name as we continue. The ancients adored Athena as the woman who, after the flood, led most of mankind in declaring their independence from the authority of Noah and his God. Now remember, I did the story on the Uralinda and how it says that Athena was one of the early Berg maidens and, is linked to Freya, and how I linked Freya up to Inanna with the riding the lion, or the lion under her feet and the serpent in her hand. And this is straight out of the Uralinda about Freya. There is no creator in the Greek religious system, only deified ancestors who welcome the serpent's enlightenment. On the idol image inside Athena's protective shield, the Genesis serpent rises up next to her. In her right hand, she holds Nike, or victory. The meaning is self-evident to me. This is the woman whose friendship with the serpent has led to mankind's victory over Noah and his God-fearing offspring. So Greek sculptors and artists consistently identified Athena with the serpent. From her pre-Parthenon temple, her idol image below grasps the serpent that trims her aegis, a symbol of authority, and she wears a crown of serpents. She has the mind of the serpent,
On the vase painting from about 500 BC, she wears her serpent-trimmed aegis as she appears to be getting instructions from the serpent. How can we be sure she was a real woman? The answer to that is self-evident as well. The Greek gods look and act exactly like real people because they were real people. In Plato's dialogue, Ephidemus, at 302 D, Socrates referred to Zeus, Apollo, and Athena as his lords and ancestors. St. Augustine understood as well that the gods were but glorified ancestors. According to the Greeks, Heracles accomplished many feats as a man here on earth. Upon his death, Nike transported him in her chariot to join his ancestors on Mount Olympus. The Greek word for gods is theoi, meaning literally places. The Greek gods almost exclusively are ancestors in the way of Cain, who put the god-shunning, serpent-welcoming, and mankind-exalting Greek religious system in place. We build grand monuments to our own accomplished ancestors. They look like temples because they are temples. Inside the Lincoln Memorial, we read, "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever." Inside Athena's ancient temple, her idol image undoubtedly evoked a similar sentiment, something akin to this: "In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom she brought back the way of Cain and the serpent's enlightenment after the flood, the memory of this adored woman we call Athena is enshrined forever." We learn from Acts 17:23 that Paul stood on the Areopagus, the hill of Ares in Athens, and read on the pedestal there, "To the unknown God." Next to where Paul stood towered the Acropolis and the precinct of the Way of Cain, with Athena's temple and her idol image in its summit. She is the reason that God was unknown to the Greeks and to most of the rest of humanity as well. In the oldest written Greek known as Linear B, she was Athena, short for Athanatos, meaning the deathless or immortal one. As I point out in my new full-color book, Genesis Characters and Events in Ancient Greek Art, Athena seemed immortal in the post-flood world because she had come through the flood. Wow, so I just said this, and I'm not the only one who is now saying this. Bringing the long pre-flood lifespan possessed by Noah and his sons and their wives, she was in fact one of those wives. Naamah is her name, the conniving wife of Noah's son Ham. The marriage of Ham, Chiron, and Naamah Chariklo. She is the last person mentioned in the line of Cain and the sister of Tubal-Cain as Naamah. Genesis 4:22. She was the daughter of Lamech, the last ruler of the Canaanites before the flood. Greek artists depicted the courtship and marriage of Ham and Naamah on several ancient vases under their Greek names Chiron and Chariklo. So Ham, Chiron, was one of the men in the line of Seth. Greek artists depict Seth men as centaurs, half man, half horse, almost always showing them bare-chested, often carrying a branch as above, indicating that they belong to an inferior branch of humanity as opposed to the supposedly superior cultured man elevating line of Cain. So this is on a vase from 600 BC. Ham, Chiron grasps the wrist of Naamah Chariklo, a sign in ancient Greek art that she is to be his bride. The artist made a special exception for the Seth man, Ham, Chiron, depicting him with the full front of a man because to them he was the good senator who brought the Canaanite princess Naamah Chariklo through the flood as his wife. In the above vase depiction from about 600 BC, Ham, Chiron takes the wrist of Naamah Chariklo, a sign in Greek art that she is to be his bride. Naamah's great-grandfather had the name Meherjul, Genesis 4:18, meaning wipe out God. That's the mindset Naamah brought with her through the flood as Ham's wife. There is no doubt in my mind that she is the one responsible for Ham's mocking attitude after their father Noah, related in Genesis 9:20-27. Naamah, Athena, inspired and directed the resurgence of the way of Cain in the post-flood world through her son Cush, Hermes, and her grandson Nimrod, Heracles, and was exalted for this reason. After the Tower of Babel, mankind adored Naamah by many titles, including Lama, Astarte, Ishtar, Hathor, Isis, Artemis, Inanna, Asherah, and ultimately in her most glorious idolization as the Greek goddess Athena. Wow. Confirmation from secular scholars. A most revealing 72-page book by secular scholars Anne Baring and Jules Cashford titled The Myth of the Goddess supplies confirming evidence. The authors trace the goddess of the ancient Near East and Mediterranean world back to a single figure, the Sumerian Namu, a minor linguistic variation of Naamah. Before we see an ancient Sumerian image of Namu, she wears a mountain hat representing the mountain from which she descended after the flood. In her hand, she holds the double-headed serpent, symbolizing the serpent's rule in the pre-flood world and now in the post-flood world as well. And, it also represents the DNA, the twin helix, the serpent. And, she is the cupbearer of the grail, the holy grail of the serpent seed of Cain. And I honestly believe this is why the aristocracy only breed within themselves, because they are trying to purify this Canaanite bloodline. The Sumerian Namu, depicted with her mountain hat representing a mountain from which she descended after the flood. Many of the significant ancient goddesses were linked to the flood in some way, beginning with the one they represented, Naamah or Namu. Baring and Cashford, the images of water and sea, the unfathomable abyss of the deep, return us to Namu, the Sumerian goddess whose ideogram was the sea. Asherah, a Canaanite goddess, was called the Lady of the Sea, which links her to the Sumerian Namu and to the Egyptian Isis, born in all wetness. Those descriptions of the great Canaanite woman who became worshipped as goddess evoke the memory of the flood and her passage through it. According to Baring and Cashford, in both the Babylonian and Sumerian stories, Inanna and Ishtar, derivative goddesses of the woman Naamah, Namu, lament the destruction of their people in the flood. The title of Baring and Cashford's book ought to be The Memory of the Adorned Woman, but as academic disciples of atheist mythologist Joseph Campbell, they failed to make obvious Genesis connection absolutely critical to understanding human history. After the flood, Noah's authority held sway for a time. Then the adoration of Canaanite women sprang up suddenly through the ancient world, and several generations later, most of humanity was without God in the world. God had let all the nations go their own way. You should be as gods. Ancient Greek religious art, with Naamah, Athena, as the key inspirational figure, chronicles that foundational period of the present evil age, Galatians 1-4, boasting of humanity's independence from our Creator, welcoming the serpent's enlightenment, and exalting man as the measure of all things. Above, from the east frieze of the Pantheon from about 430 BC, sculptors depicted Athena and Hephaestus, Zeus, and Hera's eldest son, the Greek counterpart of Cain, chatting amiably without their usual attributes. For Athena, no helmet, no spear, no serpent-trimmed aegis, no head of the Gorgon Medusa on her chest. For Hephaestus, no tongs, no hammer, no axe. The sculptors depicted them as who they knew them to be, their ancestors Naamah and Cain, whose anti-God, mankind-exalting religious outlook they wholeheartedly embraced. Below on the vase, from the same period, Heracles joins his ancestors on Olympus as an immortal. Left to right, Cush, Hermes, Eve, Hera, Adam, Zeus, Naamah, Athena, Nimrod, Heracles, Nike in the center proclaims the immortality of these ancestors as the greatest of victories. Could it be any more obvious that these sculpted And these figures are deified humans. In the ancient garden, the serpent promised, "Ye shall be as gods." And as the ancient Greek artists have communicated so plainly to us, our elite ancestors who embraced its words and its enlightenment did indeed become as gods. So this was written by Robert Bowie Johnson Jr. I think this is really interesting, and I find it interesting too that if Nimrod re-established the system or the cities of Cain, we have the ancient pyramids and we have the megalithic buildings, which I think are from pre-flood Canaanite cities they built with stone, and I think they were much bigger than we were. They were like giants because the earth was in a different form. We know that dinosaurs could not survive today because of the earth's gravity has changed. Their bodies would not be able to live. I think that people were bigger. They built bigger structures. They could build with stone. They had different technologies. And after the flood, Nimrod starts building these cities. And what do they use? The Bible says they use brick and they use slime or mortar. And we can see in the ziggurats of Sumeria that they're far simpler constructions than the ancient megalithic cities. And I think that is why these aristocratic families go back to antiquity and have bred only amongst themselves for such a long time, why they place this image over everything and in everything they do is because they are placing themselves in the position of Jesus, the Messiah, or in the position of the ladder back to heaven or Eden for them, the antediluvian world, which for them is, as Helena Blavatsky stated, the root races, or not so much the way back, but the way forward into the evolution of these godlike spiritual beings that they think they are. And, they're just as much, as the Bible tells it, they're in the dark. They don't have the light. And I believe all Blavatsky is explaining with this root race theory is the seed of Cain, or the seed of Seth, or the seed of the woman, which we know to be our Messiah Jesus, and the seed of Cain, which is, according to Dan Brown, the seed of the woman, the Holy Grail, which is the so-called Messiah of the Canaanite seed. They're fumbling around in the dark, and they're just full of deception and lies, and they've convinced themselves for thousands of years at our expense that they are gods on earth, I guess. Okay, finally, I am going to add in about Ham and incest with his mother. And in this article here, it talks about the nakedness of Noah. Genesis 9, Noah's nakedness, the sin of Ham, and the curse of Canaan. And it says, Genesis 9, 20 to 27 comes at the end of Genesis flood narrative covered in Genesis 6 to 9. This account baffles many Bible readers because it appears as though Noah curses his grandson Canaan, son of his son Ham, simply because Ham walked in and accidentally discovered Noah passed out naked and drunk. It seems like quite a severe overreaction. However, this only seems odd if one saw his father's nakedness literally. I will argue in this paper that this is a euphemistic way of saying that Ham had sex with Noah's wife, i.e. his own mother, as an attempt to usurp Noah's patriarchal authority, and that this is how Genesis' original audience would have understood the passage. I'll go on. We know the story, but I'll just explain for those who don't. This is part of Noah's story that puzzled me for years. It seems as though Noah gets drunk, passes out in his tent in said drunken stupor, and Ham comes in and inadvertently sees his dad lying there unconscious and naked. So he decides to leave. He tells his brothers, "Yo, Dad's naked in there, passed out. You might want to cover him up or something." I just went in there by accident. Then his brothers walk backwards into the tent out of respect. They cover him and leave. When Noah wakes up, he somehow knows Ham saw him naked, and enraged, he curses Ham's grandson, who hasn't even been born yet. What in the world is going on here? I can understand Noah's embarrassment, and I might even be angry in that situation myself if I didn't know who saw me and whether they did it on purpose or not. But it seems like an overreaction. Besides, how does he even know that it was his youngest son who did that? He was passed out at the time. So here it says there are basically 3 interpretations of this passage that biblical interpreters have proposed. So the first one is the sin of voyeurism. So the first option is that the sin of Ham was just voyeurism. He walked in, saw his father naked, and this violated a taboo. Here that Ham violated, Noah got embarrassed and thus outcry. It seems pretty silly, really. Ham castrated Noah. So this interpretation says the sin that Ham committed was basically removing Noah's testicles. Certainly this is a rabbinic idea. To quote Bergsma and Hahn, in the article they provide just a little snippet of an explanation or comment. And it says, one can cite examples of ancient Near East mythology, although none from the Bible, of a son castrating his father as part of an effort to usurp his authority. Also, this view also provides some rationale, albeit complex, for the curse of Canaan. Noah curses Ham's 4th son, since Ham deprived Noah of a 4th son. What is lacking, however, is any lexical hint in the text of Genesis 9:20-27 that would suggest castration. And thirdly, Ham committed paternal incest. I think that this view is the closest to the truth, as you'll see later in this paper, but it slightly misses the mark. Robert A.J. Gagnon takes his view in his book, The Bible and Homosexuality. So it says here in Robert A.J. Gagnon defends his interpretation by writing, first, the story appears to place Ham inside the tent, suggesting an action beyond peeking into the tent. Clearly states that after seeing his father's nakedness, Ham told his 2 brothers outside. The Septuagint is even more explicit, adding or translating from different Hebrew versions that Ham went out and told. What was he doing inside the tent? Possibly the tent was understood to be off limits to the sons, explaining why Shem and Japheth were outside and unaware. The fact that Shem, Japheth taking the outer garment suggests that the garment was Noah's. How did Noah's garment happen to be outside the tent? The most likely answer is Ham brought it out when he went back outside. And why would Ham have brought out Noah's garment? A possible answer, Ham brought the garment out as proof that he had done to his father. It was evidence he needed to establish bragging rights. Gangor goes on to say, third, the most important, the language of uncovering and seeing the nakedness of connects up with similar phrases denoting sexual intercourse. Leviticus uses the phrase uncover the nakedness of to denote incest. The same phrase is used when in the Bible of prostitution and adultery, and of rape and or public exposure for adultery. So after these 3 arguments, Robert Gagnon goes on to give some other reasons for why he thinks the sin that Ham committed here was homosexual, paternal rape. He concludes by saying thus, it is likely that the narrator charged Ham with committing a heinous act of incestuous homosexual rape of his father. Sorry about the graphic content, guys. So, I don't really agree with this. I think that it's the 4th option that is being laid out here, and I'm going to say why I believe that. But first I'll read the 4th option. What we have in Genesis 9 is indeed a Hebrew idiom to see. The Hebrew word ra'ah. The nakedness, the Hebrew word is raw. Of someone is idiomatic. It is expression for sexual intercourse. Now, how do we know that? If we go to Leviticus 20:17, we read this. If a man takes his sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace. And that and they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of the people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity. Michael Hesse explains that the key here is the understanding that uncovering nakedness, which describes the act of removing clothing from the genital area or the purpose of sex, and seeing nakedness are equated in this passage. Did you notice that we have the idiom to see the nakedness of and sees her nakedness, and that's plural, to uncover nakedness. Similar expression, but with two different verbs. Here in Leviticus 8, it says, "None of you shall approach anyone of his close relatives to uncover nakedness. I am the Lord God. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother, and you shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. And you shall not uncover the nakedness of your sister, your father's daughter, or your mother's daughter, whether brought up in the family or in another home. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, for their nakedness is your own nakedness." So, what it's showing here is that uncovering your father's nakedness could be considered to be his wife, which in Ham's case was his mother. Now, I'm going to show an interesting link here. So, who is Semiramis? Ancient history tells a very interesting story about a mother and child, which eventually becomes a major motif throughout most world's cultures. The mother's name is Semiramis, and her child's name was Tammuz. In this article, we will focus on the identity of the mother. According to the historian Eusebius, Semiramis was the wife of Nimrod. In the Sumerian language, her name is Samur Amat. According to less trustworthy traditions, Semiramis was Noah's granddaughter and both the mother and wife of Nimrod. So, here's this connection. And this is also according to Alexander Hislop in the Two Babylons, that Semiramis and Nimrod were mother and son, and they gave birth to a child who was Tammuz. And this is the foundation of the mother-father-child religion of Mystery Babylon. So, have we uncovered something here? Perhaps that Nimrod being a descendant of Ham and from the Cain line. We know that Ham was wicked. He basically got off the ark and he was wicked. So he would have been wicked beforehand, or had the tendencies of being wicked and trying to usurp Noah's authority. And we have Nimrod, who in the line of his family or ancestor Ham is keeping with this tradition. And, if Ham did indeed sleep with Noah's wife, his mother, and that Cain, the father of the Canaanites, was the result of that child being born, we have this religion starting here that's through the line of Cain, why Canaan through this line, and why Canaan was cursed by Noah. We have this Mystery Babylon religion of this incestuous relationship between Semiramis and Nimrod and their son Tammuz. Now, as I've stated, Ham's wife, or even Noah's wife, may have still been alive in the time of Nimrod and continued this tradition. I don't know, that's kind of a big leap, but if we look at this story of Naamah, some people actually say that Naamah was Noah's wife. So it says here, perhaps the most common name given to Noah's wife is Naamah. The Jewish writing known as Genesis Rabbah, 5th century AD, states Naamah, daughter of Lamech and sister of Tubal-Cain. So we see her as one of the only female descendants mentioned in the line of Cain. Why was she mentioned in the Bible? Given importance, I don't know. And Noah's wife, near the end of the listing of Cain's descendants in the Bible, we read these words: "Then Lamech took for himself 2 wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the second was Zillah. And Ada bore Jabal. His brother's name was Jubal. And as for Zillah, she also bore Tubal-Cain. Sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. So it says here, the rationale for choosing Naamah as the name of Noah's wife is that some interpreters believe the mention of Naamah in Genesis 4:22 must have some special significance, not explained in the text. She may have been an important person, but the Bible does not tell us anything other than her name and the names of a few immediate family members. She may have lived close to the same time as Noah, although she was in the 8th generation and Noah was in the 10th. So, we don't know. Naamah has been considered to be Noah's wife. She's been considered to be Ham's wife. Maybe they're talking about the female line of Naamah. But, the coincidence of this story of Semiramis and Nimrod having an incestuous relationship and Ham uncovering his father's nakedness, which is potentially his wife, is pretty big. I think what's also interesting is that from the time of Nimrod and Babel, we have these aristocratic or ruling families that start having these incestuous relationships and keeping their family lines, marrying their sisters and brothers. And this goes throughout all the empires, Egypt, Babylon, and even the Herods were marrying their family members. And even up till today, we have these aristocratic people marrying their family members, like the Habsburgs, and becoming inbred, which may have been okay for the people stepping straight off the ark because their genetics were more pure than ours today. But as time has gone on, the genetics do not allow for inbreeding as our DNA has become more corrupted. Anyway, I thought I'd just add that in here. But I believe that, the first time this happened, the deluge, as the Bible tells us, the earth was flooded. The next time it happens, the earth will be burnt, and a new heaven and earth will be revealed. And it may happen through this torrid meteor shower at some point in our future. So keep an eye out for the time around Halloween as being a possible time for the judgment and the return of Christ. Thanks for listening, everyone.